Here goes. Um, Today we're going to start talking about a topic called elasticity. Okay, I'm going to start it by I'm going to start this by talking about sort of a hypothetical lemonade stand. Okay, admire my beautiful artwork, of course. Okay, so imagine the following scenario: my kids on a beautiful summer afternoon set up a lemonade stand, and they start pricing their lemonade at $2 a glass. They're able to sell 100 glasses of lemonade. And they think, maybe we can sell 100 glasses of lemonade at $2 a piece. We could make more money if we just raise the price. So they decide they're going to raise the price from $2 a glass to $4 a glass. Are they going to make more money? Yes, no, maybe. I mean, the answer is, I hope, not necessarily, right? Raising the price of lemonade, they are not necessarily going to end up with more money. Why not? Hmm? They might lose customers, right? Yeah. Um, and so, like, basically, when they double the price of lemonade, there's going to be a reduction in customers. We just know that. That's the law of demand. There will be fewer people willing to purchase lemonade, fewer people able to purchase lemonade. Again, that's the law of demand. But it depends how responsive customers are to the price change. Yeah. Um, if a if doubling the price of lemonade cuts their customers in half, then it's like equivalent, right? Then it's a wash. But if cutting the price, I'm sorry, if doubling the price reduces their customers by more than a half, they lose money. Okay? So if customers are very responsive to a price change, they lose money. If customers are not very responsive to a price change, if doubling the price, their customers drop, but by less than half, then they make more money, right? So it really depends on how responsive customers are to price changes. And that is a concept that has a particular name in economics. It is called elasticity. Okay, so I've got the word written up here for you all to see. Elasticity, the sensitivity of consumers to, especially, the sensitivity of anything to anything is called the elasticity. But the one that we are often most interested in is called the price elasticity of demand, which is how sensitive consumers are to a change in price. Okay, and so I'm going to talk about our formal definition, some of the implications of a high elasticity or a low elasticity, as well as some of the things that will determine how elastic demand is. Okay, I think of this hypothetical lemonade stand. The responsiveness of customers to an increase in price, like whether they lose a lot of customers or just a few, might depend on some other factors. What might be one thing? Like just sort of think, you know, what are some things that are going to impact how responsive customers are? So, I mean, one type of thing might be, is there another lemonade stand nearby, right? There's another lemonade stand right across the road. That's going to impact how responsive customers are to an increase in price. Yeah. Um, you know, even if it's um, even if it's a iced tea stand nearby, those things matter to customers. Okay, so we'll talk about some of the factors that will impact the. Sorry. We'll talk about some of the factors that will impact the elasticity of demand. Okay, so first, a definition of elasticity. It is intended to be more or less a measure of responsiveness or sensitivity okay, and we talk about the elasticity of X with respect to Y. Okay, as I said, the most common application is the elasticity of demand with respect to price. So let me just do examples. Demand with respect to price, but also we could talk about elasticity of supply with respect to price. We could talk about the elasticity of demand with respect to income. Okay, all of these are like talking about how responsive is, in the last case, demand to an increase or decrease in customers' income. Is demand for this good sensitive to changes in income? Okay, so formally, the elasticity is measured as the percent elasticity is the percent change in X divided by the percent change in Y. Okay. And this is important. You all will need to calculate some elasticities. Now, the way that we do this, percent change is the change in X over, right, X bar divided by the change in Y over Y bar. The bar, in this case, stands for average. Okay. Let me do an example. So price elasticity of demand, or to fit with the terminology that I introduced, price elasticity of demand. This is really the elasticity of demand with respect to price. Okay, this is measured as the percent change in quantity demanded divided by the percent change in price. Okay, so we're given two sets of prices and the quantities demanded. So call them P1 and P2. And when the price is P1, quantity demanded is Q1. When the price is P2, quantity demanded is Q2. Okay. So the way that we calculate this elasticity, percent change in quantity demanded, so that's like Q2 minus Q1, the change in quantity demanded, divided by, all right, Q bar, the average of the prices, or the average of the quantities. And all this gets divided by P2 minus P1 over P bar. Okay. By the way, don't overlook the fact that you need to be able to do this calculation. Okay, it's not a terribly hard calculation. Mathematically, it's not a hard calculation, but you need to know how to do it. This will show up on tests, for example. Okay. So, if I told you that when the price of lemonade is $2, then customers want to purchase 100 cups of lemonade, then when the price is $4, customers want to purchase, let me call the first one Q1. When the price is $4, customers want to purchase, let me do 80 cups of lemonade. Okay, calculate the elasticity. So the elasticity, remember, it's the percent change in quantity demanded over the percent change in price. Okay, percent change in something is the change in that something divided by, in this case, the average. So change in quantity divided by average quantity. Change in price divided by average price. Okay, continuing on. Let's see. The change in quantity is 100. Actually, to be consistent, I should do 80 minus 100 divided by, and then average quantity, the average of 80 and 100. Then in the bottom part of the fraction, change in price is, price goes from 2 to 4, 4 minus 2 divided by average price. Okay. Now I'm writing out all the terms here, and it looks like there's a lot of math going on, but I think there really isn't, this really isn't terribly difficult. In the numerator, percent change, well, the change is negative 20 divided by average price 90. Okay, and then in the denominator, change in price is 2 divided by average price is 3. Okay, and then the rest of this is just like math, simple calculations. I think the answer to this, you could plug it into a calculator, or you could cancel out a bunch of terms, is negative 1/3. Okay. Now, just for the sake of simplicity, we will make the elasticity positive. Okay. In other words, we'll just forget about the negative sign, because the elasticity of demand, if you calculate it this way, it'll always give you a negative value. Okay. Change in quantity and change in price go in opposite directions. So it'll always be negative. And for simplicity, we'll just call it 1/3. Got it? So forget about that negative part. Okay, so this elasticity is negative 1/3, or we'll just say 1/3. It's important when we calculate the elasticity, or when we interpret the elasticity, to compare it to, or to think of it relative to 1. Okay. So elasticity less than 1 versus elasticity greater than 1. Okay, we have names for these. We call this elastic. No. That one is inelastic. Inelastic demand. And elasticity greater than 1 is elastic demand. In other words, elasticity less than 1 means not very responsive. And an elasticity greater than 1 means very responsive. Okay. Going back to this example, the price doubled, right? But demand went from 90 to 80. So it's a big change in price, but it results in a fairly small, proportionally, a fairly small change in quantity demanded. It was not a huge response. So when we calculate the elasticity, we get a value of 1/3, less than 1. We describe demand as being inelastic, not very responsive. Okay? And there's something important about elastic versus inelastic. Now, there's a case in between when the elasticity is equal to 1. That is called unit elastic. Okay. And it means that the percent change in quantity demanded is the same as the percent change in price. Okay? So it's like when price goes up by 50%, quantity demanded goes down by 50%. Okay? Exactly equal and opposite changes. Okay? And that's sort of the mid case between inelastic and elastic. It's called unit elastic. Do you have a question?
Yeah, so this might be like a dumb question, but what do producers want? Do they want it to be elastic or inelastic?
Okay, what do producers want? Okay, no, that is the okay. You said that might be a dumb question. That is actually the opposite of a dumb question. A person setting a price wants for demand to be inelastic. They do not want a large price. They do not want a large change in quantity demanded when they raise the price. Okay, when demand is inelastic, you can increase the price and revenue will go up. Okay, when demand is unit elastic, changing the price doesn't change the revenue. Like the 50% increase in price is exactly offset by a 50% decrease in quantity purchased. And so they're equal and opposite, they cancel out. Okay, and then when elasticity is greater than 1, oops, I misspelled a word. When elasticity is greater than 1, raising the price reduces revenue. Yeah. So, and I'll go there in just a minute. Yeah. Um, okay. So that was again the opposite of a stupid question. Um, that's part of the reason why we distinguish between these cases, and then that's also going to be like later on. I'm going to go into like circumstances that cause demand to be elastic or inelastic, which will give us an idea like circumstances when a price setter can make money by raising the price. Um, okay, so let me go through a couple of examples. I'm going to also point out while we do this, as I do these three different examples, that the shape of the demand curve tells us something about the elasticity. Okay? Remember that the the slope of the demand curve, when we graph the demand curve, actually I should do that graph. Um, we have price on the vertical axis, quantity on the horizontal axis. The demand curve slopes down. So if we calculate the slope between 2 points, remember that's the change in rise over the change in run. Okay, so the slope here is change in price divided by change in quantity. Okay, so again, slope is change in price over change in quantity. And that is almost, or that is similar to the reciprocal of the elasticity. The elasticity is change in quantity over quantity divided by change in price over price. You see how it's like got the same kind of components to it. The change in quantity over change in price just flipped the other way. Okay, so high elasticity means a low slope or a small slope to the demand curve. Okay, low elasticity means a large slope. Okay, so that's just something else to know. Later on, I'll summarize a whole bunch of things about these elasticities. But first, let me move on to some examples. Um, okay, here. I'm going to draw a hypothetical market for something. And here I'm going to start out with the demand curve. Nice, simple. I'll say it's medium steep. Not too steep, not too shallow. Okay. And I'll think about what happens to demand as the price increases. Okay. So, sorry. Then I'm going to, before I do that, I'm going to talk through a couple other demand curves. Here's one that's less steep, right, than the first one. It's more shallow. And then a third demand curve that is steeper than the other two. I'm going to show that how the same price change results in different changes in quantity demanded and different elasticities is the important thing. Okay, so let's go back to that first case. Sort of the medium steep demand curve and calculate what happens to demand and then calculate the elasticity of demand when the price increases from $2 to $4. Let me hang on just a second. Okay, so when the price increases from $2 to $4, let's look at what happens to quantity demanded. When quantity demanded was $2, when price was $2, quantity demanded was 20. When the price increases to $4, quantity demanded goes down to 10. Okay, let's calculate the elasticity of demand. Remember, it's the percent change in quantity demanded divided by the percent change in price. So quantity demanded, the change is from 20 to 10 divided by the average price is 15. Right, the average of 10 and 20 is 15. Then average quantity is 15. I apologize. Okay. Then change in price. Price increases to 4 from 2 divided by the average price, which is 3. So in the numerator of the fraction, the top part of the fraction, we have negative 10 over 15. In the bottom part of the fraction, we have 2 over 3. Okay. And the numerator, that simplifies to negative 2/3. The denominator is 2/3. So this works out to 1. Yeah, negative 1, but remember, I said we're just going to forget about the minus sign. Okay, then I gave you all a term. What do we call it when the elasticity of demand is equal to 1? It's called unit elastic. Okay, and the thing I'm going to point out is what happens to revenue when demand is unit elastic. At the original price, remember revenue is price times quantity. So the original price, it is, revenue is P1 times Q1. So that's 2 times 20 is 40. Okay, $40 of revenue. At the higher price, the new price, revenue is P2 times Q2. So $4 times 10 that are sold is $40. So increasing the price, revenue stays the same because the increase in price is exactly offset by a decrease in quantity. Price goes up by 2/3, quantity goes down by 2/3, and they cancel each other out more or less. Does that make sense? Okay, so unit elastic. If demand is unit elastic, revenue will be the same regardless of price. There's another way to think of unit elastic, which is from the consumer's perspective. The consumer is spending an equal amount of money on the good regardless of price. So for example, if I put aside $100 a month to purchase gasoline, and some months gas is more expensive, I can afford less. Other months gas is cheap, I can afford more. If I set aside a fixed expenditure on gasoline, then my demand is unit elastic. So when gas is $2.50 a gallon, I can purchase 40 gallons. When the price of gas is $2 a gallon, I purchase 50 gallons. If we work out the elasticity, it is unit elastic. Okay, an elasticity of 1. Okay, so anyhow, I've talked about this moderately steep demand curve. Next, I'm going to go to one that is more shallow. Okay, demand is less steep. I'm going to calculate what the elasticity is for this demand curve when the price increases from $2 to $4. So for this demand curve, you know, increasing the price, basically doubling the price, causes demand to drop to a fifth. You should get the idea. This is a big change in quantity demanded, right? It's gone from 25 to 5. Relatively speaking, that's a big, big change in quantity demanded. And so you should anticipate that when we calculate the elasticity of demand, it will be large. Okay? So let's do that. Elasticity, percent change in quantity demanded divided by a percent change in price. So the change in quantity demanded goes from 25 to 5. Let's see, how do I do 5 minus 25 divided by average by the average of those quantities, which is 15, right? Okay. Then in the bottom part of the fraction, percent change in the price is 4 minus 2 divided by average price. Okay, so doing this math, in the numerator we have negative 20 divided by 15. In the denominator, 2 divided by 3. And you could plug it into a calculator. I just like to simplify things as much as I can, like mentally. So let's see, 20 over 15 simplifies to 4/3 divided by 2/3. And 4/3 is twice of 2/3. So that comes out to -2, or 2. Okay. Oh my God, that's awful math. -2 equals 2. Okay. So the elasticity, when we work it out, is 2. Okay. Greater than 1. Remember, 1 is kind of our reference point. If elasticity is greater than 1, it means demand is very responsive to a price increase. It also means that revenue will go down. So let me calculate original revenue. P1 times Q1, that's 4 times 25, $100 of revenue originally. The new revenue, P2 times Q2, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Original price was 2, and they sold 25. So original price was 2, they sold 25, revenue is 50. The new revenue price is 4, and they sell 5, revenue is 20. So The revenue goes down when the price goes up. Okay. This is, again, what happens with elastic demand. Okay, now I'm going to move on to the third scenario, which is a fairly steep demand curve. Okay, and the same change in price, but there will be a smaller change in quantity demanded. That's what a steep demand curve will produce. We calculate the elasticity. Okay, change in quantity over average quantity divided by change in price over average price. So that change in quantity, that goes from, I'm just going to do this bigger minus smaller. It'll give me a positive answer. Okay, so 17.5 divided by, minus 12.5 divided by the average quantity, 15. And then in the denominator, change in price, 4 minus 2 divided by 3. Okay, so this is, in the numerator, 5 divided by 15. In the denominator, 2 divided by 3. Numerator simplifies to 1/3, denominator is 2/3, and 1/3 is half of 2/3. Okay. So this elasticity is less than 1, so we call demand inelastic. Okay, not very responsive. Okay, and I'm going to mention the same, or do the same calculations for revenue. It's going to be the case that revenue increases. So original revenue was P1 times Q1. Oh, dang it, I made these numbers hard, didn't I? 4 times 17.5 is 3570. New revenue. No. I did this wrong again. Okay. 2 times 17.5, which is $35 of revenue. Then after the price increase, revenue is P2 times Q2, so 4 times 12.5, which is 50. So revenue increases. Okay. Alrighty. So I've talked about the three major classifications of elasticity. Demand can be unit elastic, inelastic, or elastic. And those are associated with moderately steep, steep and shallow demand curves. They are associated with particular changes in prices. As a matter of fact, let me just outline some of those things. Oh, demand is pretty steep. Oh, this is the calculation that I just did. Okay, let me outline some of these things. And again, I'll mention there are three main cases. Demand can be inelastic, unit elastic, or elastic. Okay. I'm actually going to add two more cases to this. Perfectly inelastic and perfectly elastic. Okay, so the definitions. Remember, unit elastic means the elasticity is 1, and that means that the percent change in quantity demanded is equal to the percent change in price. Okay, at least equal and opposite. Yeah. So inelastic means that the elasticity is less than 1, which means that the percent change in quantity demanded is less than the percent change in price. Elastic means that the elasticity is greater than 1, and the percent change in quantity demanded is greater than the percent change in price. Okay? Other ways to interpret this. Elastic means that there is a fairly small change in demand relative to the change in price. Elastic means that they are equal and opposite. Unelastic means equal and opposite. Elastic means there's a big change in quantity demanded relative to the change in price. Now, there are two extreme cases. Perfectly inelastic means 0. Okay? That there is no change in quantity demanded when the price changes. Okay? Demand is completely unresponsive to price. Now, if I had to give an example, this is someone who needs a medication and will pay for that medication at any price. A diabetic's demand for insulin might be perfectly inelastic. A type 1 diabetic needs insulin to live. They need a certain quantity, and if the price goes up, they will still have to purchase the same quantity of medication. They don't have an option to cut back and stay alive. If the price goes down, they're not going to purchase more. They have a certain amount that they want. So demand is independent of price, perfectly inelastic. The other extreme is perfectly elastic. The elasticity is, if you calculate it, infinite. It means that when the price increases, quantity demanded goes to 0. Okay. If you increase your price at all, then the demand for the good just drops off entirely. 100% decrease in quantity demanded. Now, this would be the case if, for example, there is an identical product for sale at the original price. Okay. You know that picture of the lemonade stand? Maybe you couldn't see it, but right outside the frame was another identical lemonade stand selling identical lemonade, still at a price of $2. So when this lemonade stand raised its price from $2 to $4, people just stopped purchasing their lemonade altogether. Now, even if they raised their price to from $2 to $2 and a penny, like hypothetically, people would stop purchasing their lemonade and go to the cheaper stand, or to the stand that still charges $2. So even the tiniest increase in price results in a 100% drop in quantity demanded. That's perfectly inelastic. Now, some other things. Let's see. Inelastic means that price increase leads to a revenue increase. Okay. Unit elastic, a price increase leads to the same revenue. So this is seeing things from the perspective of a seller who might be able to set price, for example. Elastic means that when the price increases, revenue decreases. Okay. So those are other statements that are true about inelastic and elastic demands. Perfectly elastic, I'll make a note that when the price increases, revenue goes to zero. Okay. Got it? Okay. Perfectly inelastic. I couldn't, I can't really say more than like price increase leads to a revenue increase as well. Um, there's nothing more specific than that. Okay, now shapes of the demand curves. Inelastic demand is associated with a steep demand curve. Okay. Elastic demand is associated with a shallow demand curve. In other words, not very steep, shallow demand curve. Perfectly elastic means that the demand curve is flat. Okay. The way to think of that is in a graph of price and quantity. Okay, price, quantity. There is a fixed price. Let me call it, I don't know, P1. There's a fixed price, and you can sell as much as you want at P1. But you know what? I'm going to change this a little bit. It's like at a price of P1, you can sell anything more than, you can sell any quantity you want. But at a price of, no. At a price above P1, quantity demanded is zero. Does that make sense? Like, if the price is greater than P1, quantity demanded is zero. Okay. But we just refer to this as a flat demand curve. Okay. Um, and this is something that we see that firms in competitive markets, firms that are price takers, face perfectly elastic demand. Um, yeah, again, I talk about perfectly competitive markets. Think of the market for gasoline, where there are at each corner there are 4 gas stations selling identical gasoline. If everyone is selling gas at $2.50 a gallon, and you decide your gas station is going to raise the price to $2.51 a gallon, your demand is just going to go to zero. You are effectively a price taker. You have to accept the same price that everyone else in the market is charging. Okay, so that's perfectly elastic demand. Now, perfectly inelastic demand is a vertical demand curve. Okay, so when we do the graph of quantity and price, okay, demand is just a straight line like this, meaning that there's fixed quantities, we call it Q1, and people will purchase this quantity at any price. Okay, so regardless of price, quantity demanded is the same Q1. Okay. So, I'm going. So I've talked about this elasticity and some of the meanings of inelastic, or some of the implications of inelastic and elastic demand. Now I'm going to talk about circumstances under which we would expect demand to be one way or another. Okay, so let me go there. Okay, these are going to be some rules to anticipate when demand will be elastic or inelastic. But I want to think of 2 examples of price setting behavior. Okay. One is, okay, does anyone know who Greg Mankiw is? Greg Mankiw? Name Mankiw sound familiar? Mankiw? Yes? Yes, he wrote the textbook. Okay, good. So, textbook publishers. Okay. Textbook publishers get to set the prices of their textbooks. And what do they want to do when they set the prices of textbooks? Make money, right? Make money off of you all. Now, you all can at some point rebel and just be like, screw this, I'm not buying the textbook. Okay? If that, and I expect this sometimes crosses your mind. Is it really worth paying $300 for a such and such textbook? Is it really worth paying another $150 for the optional study guide? Yes, you think about this. You're conscious of the price and you're responsive to prices. So I'll use this as one example that might like resonate with you all. That textbook publishers think about how much they can raise the price, and they want to raise the price when demand is inelastic. They can make money by raising the price. If demand is elastic, they would lose money by raising the price. So, yeah, textbook publishers are price setters, and I think most of them are in it for making the money. I'm I, I'm I dislike saying that Greg Mankiw is without a doubt a good economist in this perspective. He has no problem saying that he makes this textbook in order to make himself rich. He's not doing it as a charity. There was some congressional hearing a few years ago on the obscenely high price of college textbooks, and Greg Mankiw was called in to testify because he wrote one of the most he wrote the most popular college textbook on introductory economics, the one that you all are using. On top of that, he's an economist, so he understands price-setting behavior. So he was called in to testify, and he told Congress how many millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, he's made off the textbook. And sorry, I'm being honest. He makes money off it. It's not a charity for him. He's proud of how much he makes off of it. And I do try to pay some attention to prices of books I select. However, it is, I think, his textbook is considerably better than the competition. Okay, regardless, let me get to another one. Prescription drugs. Okay, the manufacturer of a prescription drug gets to set the price on their drug. And usually for the first 7 or 14 years after a drug comes to market, the company that invented the drug has the exclusive right to produce that drug. And then they also get to decide how much to charge for the drug. Okay, so another example of a price setter. Now, let me do circumstances that under which demand will be inelastic. I'll do it that way. And these are called technically Marshall's rules of demand. Okay. Though you don't need to know who Marshall was or even his name. Okay. Demand will be more inelastic when, okay, number one, there are no close substitutes. Okay, so this is one thing that will impact the elasticity of demand. If there are close substitutes for the good, demand will be more elastic. If there are no close substitutes, demand will be inelastic. Now think of the textbooks. When you're being price conscious about purchasing a textbook, you might wonder, is there a good alternative to this textbook? Usually the answer is no. If Mankiw is the required textbook for a course, there's not really a good alternative to that. You can't go out and grab a copy of Dan Hammermesh's Introduction to Economics textbook and expect it to be interchangeable. Okay? Maybe if you were really desperate, you could use a different author's textbook and you'd have similar coverage, but it's not a close substitute. oh, I'll be honest, when I taught statistics, um, I'm not teaching statistics now, but or at least when I teach statistics, I feel bad about the about adopting a textbook when they're all the same. They all cover the same topics in the same order, and of course use the same formulas. I mean, out of curiosity, has anyone taken like an AP Stats course or even stats here on campus? Yeah, I have a couple of people. You all learn the same topics in the same order. The books are essentially interchangeable. I got to the point where it's like either I could give a list of textbooks and say any of these is fine, or I just grabbed an old book. I mean, it's like here's a book that here's an ancient edition. It's dirt cheap because the the formulas aren't updated. They're not coming out with clever new formulas for the correlation coefficient. Still, the books seem to feel it's necessary to revise every few years. In part, that's a game to ensure that they're not um, good substitutes. Okay, anyhow, no close substitutes. However, there do exist substitutes for textbooks, right? I mean, you could consider a different author. If the price gets too high, you start thinking along these lines. Um, but other options might be like, I don't know. I can ask you all. Have you ever tried going with something that's not exactly the book that was required for the class in order to save money? What can you do? Anything? Um, older editions? Okay. I think the book for this course is ManQ 8th edition. ManQ 7th edition is 95% the same. Okay. And it's a tenth of the cost. And so, like, there is an option for a substitute. Sometimes there will be international editions of textbooks. Okay. This is a game that textbook publishers play to sort of break up the market, where they know that they might be able to charge a higher price for a textbook in the US than in Mexico for the same textbook. If, if they set a price appropriate for the US, it might price them out of the market in Mexico. If they set a price appropriate for Mexico, then it'll not generate enough money in the US. So they publish slightly different versions of the textbook for different markets. And again, all the text might be the same, except the little boxes saying examples will be modified in a couple of places for a Mexican audience, and it'll be sold as if it's a different book. So there are substitutes, but no perfect substitutes. The more substitutes there are and the better the substitutes are, the more sensitive you will be to price. If you realize that the old edition of the textbook is really, really, really similar to the current edition, then raising the price of the current edition will cause you to switch, right? So good substitutes will mean that consumers can be more responsive to prices. No close substitutes, demand will be inelastic. Um, drugs. Again, um, are there close substitutes for the drug? If there are no close substitutes for the drug manufacturer can raise the price and people will still purchase it. Yeah. Um, like insulin, there is no substitute for insulin. And if yeah, there is no substitute for insulin. And okay, so the drug manufacturer, if the drug manufacturer can set the price, they know that they could charge as much as they like, essentially, and people will still purchase the same amount. Demand is almost perfectly inelastic. Um, let's see. I can I can get into prescription drugs a lot. There's some fascinating things in the market. Um, one drug that maybe more of you all are familiar with um, uh, has a ridiculously high price. Okay, it's not exactly a drug, but an EpiPen. Okay. Okay. Does anyone carry an EpiPen? Okay, you do. You do as well. Okay, you carry an EpiPen. Others, do you know what these are? Okay, I mean technically they're called um, epinephrine. I can't spell epinephrine auto injectors. Okay, epinephrine is a drug that's given to counteract a severe allergic reaction. So for people who have severe food allergies or like bee sting allergies, something like that, um, uh, that run the risk of a severe allergic reaction that can be life threatening, can limit their ability to breathe if exposed to the allergen. Epinephrine sort of cancels out that reaction. And these epinephrine auto injectors, it's like just a tube, you push it against your skin, a needle pops out and injects epinephrine into your skin. Okay, so people with EpiPens, is that a fair description? Yeah. Okay. So what's the alternative to carrying an EpiPen? What?
There's a competitor, barbecue.
There is a competitor.
But at some time there wasn't, so we can pretend like this.
Yeah. Okay. So okay. Well, that's a game changer. Um, can you spell the name?
Barbecue.
Like you. You. Avi Q.
It's two. I think there's a dash between times.
Okay. Um. Okay. Okay. Something like this.
Maybe there's no I. There's no I.
At the end. Okay. This must be very new within the past year or two.
It's
Maybe.
been like 5 years, but then there was a certain time that they had to recall them. So that's
Okay.
when prices really skyrocketed.
Okay, so what you just said was there was a time when they were recalled, and that's when the prices of EpiPens skyrocketed. Okay, because there was no close substitute for an EpiPen, right? And the drug manufacturer, which I think is Mylan, was like, hell, we can keep jacking up the price, and for these people who feel they need an EpiPen, they're willing to pay a lot for an EpiPen, right? And presumably this is something you feel you need because it is life saving if you're exposed to an allergen. Okay, now, okay, so there's a competitor. Okay, see, I learn things by coming to class. Um, yeah, so epinephrine autoinjectors, there are alternatives. So as you said, there's another brand of epinephrine autoinjector. Um, there is an old-fashioned option, which is just a vial of epinephrine. Um, okay, vial of epinephrine plus a syringe. Okay, that is a substitute. It's not the auto injector that you just like pressed your skin, the needle pops out and injects it into you. But you could carry around a little vial of epinephrine, stick your syringe into it, draw it, and then inject yourself. I mean, it is a substitute. Is it a close substitute? Maybe not. Okay. Um, there are also generic epinephrine autoinjectors. Um, EpiPen is the brand name, but if you ask your doctor to prescribe you a generic, you can get it, but you almost have to go out of your way to tell your doctor, I want a generic epinephrine autoinjector. It's just so commonly known by the brand name that people don't even think of the alternative. It's one of these things where the brand name is almost synonymous with the item. There are, and this is really fascinating. Again, there are generic, no brand um, auto injectors. They're manufactured by the same company that makes the brand name versions, Mylan, and they are, for all practical purposes, identical. But in one case, they're sold under the brand name, and in the other case, they're sold under the generic without a brand name, and you have to ask for them by the technical term epinephrine autoinjector. It's just a way of kind of separating the market into people who are price conscious versus people who are not. Okay, so I talked about drugs. An EpiPen is an example of something where there are substitutes, just not close substitutes. And when the alternative was recalled from the market, um, the price went up. Okay, because the manufacturer knows it's something that there was no competition. Okay, so I've talked about rule number one, no close substitutes. Rule number two, demand will be inelastic if people are unwilling to compromise on the outcome, or actually, sorry, maybe I should say it's a necessity rather than a luxury. Okay. Um, let's think of it that way. The first way I worded it was overly complicated. If it's a necessity, demand will be more inelastic. And remember, this gives the manufacturer more ability to set the price and to raise the price without demand dropping off. Okay, now I talked about insulin as an example of a drug. Is insulin a luxury or a necessity? It's a necessity. So if there were a single insulin producer that could set the price, it knows people are going to pay a price. Okay, epinephrine auto injectors. Do you all regard those as luxuries to have them, or are they necessary? They're necessary under, like, if you have the severe allergic reaction, they are necessary, right? It's not a luxury. So again, it's something where the one manufacturer realizes, since this is a necessity, we can raise the price and demand will not drop off much. Um, Textbooks. Is the required textbook for a course a luxury or a necessity? It's essentially a necessity, right? Um, at least, like, it's a necessity in order to do well in the course. Now, that's why I first worded this the way that I usually think of it, unwilling to compromise on the outcome. I think of the goods we purchase as means to an end. You don't purchase a textbook because you like the textbook. Purchase a textbook because you want a good grade in the course. And it really depends on, and so whether something is a necessity or luxury really depends on how much you're willing to compromise on the outcome, like the good grade. Purchasing an EpiPen, it is a means to an end, staying alive, and you're not very willing to compromise on staying alive. That makes the good a necessity. Okay, number 3 on the list. Let me just double check. Okay, more inelastic when the good is a small share of the budget. Okay. In other words, consumers will be more responsive to prices for things that are a large share of their budgets. And so I go back to textbooks as an example. Um, Students are responsive to prices of textbooks. They do worry about prices of textbooks, and publishers have raised prices to the point where like it does become an issue. One of the reasons why students are responsive to the prices of textbooks is because they are a large share of your budget. If you look at kind of what your college budget is supposed to be, like you go to a financial aid website for a school, they'll be like, well, this amount for tuition, this amount for room, for board, for textbooks, for living expenses. I mean, they give 5 or 6 things that go into your budget, and textbooks are one of those major categories. So, again, if textbooks are a large share of the budget, people will be more sensitive to price increases. The same for drugs that are a large share of the budget. Doubling the price of like doubling the price of all your textbooks is going to have a big impact on your overall budget, and you're going to have to think about how to adjust things. Okay? And you will have to make changes, okay, including perhaps cutting back on the textbooks you purchase or finding substitutes. Okay? But doubling the price of salt is probably going to have very little impact on your consumption of salt. Okay? And so think about this. Do you buy salt? Have you purchased salt in the past year or two? Yeah. Did you pay attention to how much it cost? Do you know how much a canister of salt costs? So if the price were to double, you wouldn't even notice. You wouldn't change anything you do. Okay. And that's no surprise because a canister of salt might cost 79 cents. Okay. If it's $2, I mean, how often do you really buy salt? You buy a canister every year or two. Um, okay. And so it's not going to really bother you. So again, demand will be more inelastic. Wait, sorry, what am I doing? More inelastic, non-responsive when it's a small share of the budget. Okay, number 4, demand will be more inelastic in the short run than the long run. Okay. So again, I'm talking about more inelastic. So that means that in the long run, people will be more responsive to a price increase than they will be in the short run. So imagine a different example. The price of gasoline doubles. Okay, what will that do to my demand for gasoline? Well, in the short run, there's a limit to how much I can adjust. I still need to drive my car to work. Same distance to get to work, same number of days of the week that I'm on campus. I can maybe consolidate some of my errands that I run, but maybe I can go on vacation a little bit less. Okay, all of these examples are like pre-COVID. Okay, but there's a limit to how much I can adjust my gasoline consumption in the short run. In the long run, what are some of the additional things I can do to adjust my gas consumption? Yeah. Okay, public transportation. You know, I'm going to say actually, I could probably do that in the short run. That's a good idea for something I could try in the short run. Um, if it existed, okay, no public transportation between my house and here, but you know what? I could maybe find someone to carpool with. It's not something I could do overnight, but I could maybe find someone to carpool with, and we could coordinate our schedules for next semester so that we need to be on campus at the same times. So let me sort of take what you said and rethink how that would actually apply to me. Okay, what else can I do in the long run to adjust my gas consumption? Yeah. Think about buying an electric car. Yeah. Or even just a more fuel efficient car. Um, yep. Other things, adjust my work schedule, try to work from home one day a week. Okay. And these are things that I can set up in the long run, and my gas consumption can drop off more in the long run than it can in the short run. Okay. And now the final thing on this list is demand will be more inelastic for large categories of goods than for specific goods. So, if we are talking about different forms of, so demand is, okay, more elastic for gasoline than for fuel in general. Okay, or energy in general. So one specific type of good, like I could change my consumption of that type of good, but a lot of that will just be substituting something else in kind of the same general category. So I might consume less gasoline, but instead I am purchasing diesel or electric energy or some other form of energy for my vehicle. Um, my house, I have different options for how to warm my house. And, if the price of, different options. I can use propane heat, I can use wood heat, I can use electric heat. Um, if the price of one type of energy goes up, I might adjust my consumption of that type of energy. So I might be responsive to a change in the price of propane by shifting to more electric and wood heat. But still, as if prices of all sorts of heating fuels went up, I wouldn't change my consumption as much because I still need something. Okay, so again, more inelastic for a large category of goods than for any specific good. So, questions about elasticity? I'm going to mention a couple other elasticities. Okay. One is the cross price elasticity of demand. Okay. And this is the percent change in the quantity of one good divided by the percent change in the price of a related good. Okay. So this is, for example, the impact of higher gas prices on demand for SUVs, or the impact of raising gas prices on demand for electric cars. Now, with this cross price elasticity of demand, if it is negative, it means that the goods are complements. Okay, if it's positive, the goods are substitutes. Okay, so if we calculate this cross price elasticity of demand, usually the interesting thing is whether it is positive or negative, and that tells us whether the goods are complements or substitutes. And like, if you're trying to keep this straight, reason it through. Gasoline and non-electric cars are, what do you expect they are? Complements or substitutes? Complements, right? Okay. So, and so increase in the price of gas leads to a decrease in demand for cars, non-electric cars. So that means that when you calculate this elasticity, like an increase, a positive change in price of gas results in a negative change in quantity of cars. Okay. So for complements, this cross price elasticity of demand will be um, negative. Okay, those always go in opposite directions. Now, for substitutes, let's see, what are some substitutes? Uh, gas and electric cars. Okay, an increase in the price of gas can lead to would lead to increase in demand for electric cars. So when we calculate that cross-price elasticity, it's a positive change in quantity of electric cars electric cars divided by a positive change in price of gas. Okay, something positive divided by something positive is positive. Like and like in the first example with complements, something negative divided by something positive, that'll be negative. They go in opposite directions. Okay, now this can also be a way of testing or determining if two goods are substitutes or complements. Okay, so I brought up as an example of complements peanut butter and jelly, and said, when the price of peanut butter goes up, then you purchase less jelly. And someone, maybe Stephanie, said, well, not necessarily so. Maybe when the price of peanut butter goes up, then I need to purchase more jelly to compensate for it. And the way that you would eat them, if that's true, is as substitutes. Okay, well, the truth is we can kind of test or determine whether goods are complements or substitutes by looking at that connection between changes in the price of one good and change in demand for another. It might be that for some consumers, goods are complements, for other consumers, the same goods are substitutes, but we can measure the complementarity or substitution between goods by looking at the relationship between those changes. Okay, next on the list of elasticities, there is the income elasticity of demand. Okay, and this is the percent change in quantity demanded for a percent change in income. Okay, so if a person's income doubles, what happens to their demand for a good? Does it double? Does it less than double? Does it go down? Okay. Now, with the income elasticity of demand, the important thing, or like as a comparison, again, whether the income elasticity of demand is negative or positive tells us something about the good. If the income elasticity is negative, that means that when income goes up, demand goes down. Those two things go in opposite directions. Income up, demand down. What do we call those types of goods? Purchase less of it when your income goes up? Yeah. Inferior goods. Perfect. Okay, an inferior good. And if it's positive, it's a normal good. Okay. And a final elasticity to mention, the price elasticity of supply. Okay, price elasticity of supply is the percent change in quantity supplied divided by the percent change in price. Okay, and so this is from the supply side of the market, the producer or seller side of the market. How much the quantity they sell goes up, or goes up when the price increases. So if I'm selling lemonade and well, no, if I'm manufacturing widgets at my factory, and because of current economic conditions, the price of widgets has gone up, how much do I increase my production? That change in production or quantity supplied divided by the change in price, that's known as the price elasticity of supply. And this gets categorized the same as the price elasticity of demand. Um, it can be described as inelastic when it's less than one, elastic when it's greater than one. It is unit elastic. And then there are the extreme cases, perfectly inelastic and perfectly elastic. Okay. Okay. So I've talked much more about the price elasticity of demand because it's the most interesting of these elasticities. Um, uh, and it'll get used the most. We will apply price elasticity of supply sometimes. It's just like the price elasticity of demand, except for the opposite side of the market. Okay, the other two elasticities are less common. All right, having done all that, my lecture is over.